All right, guys, if you really want the secret on how to make your 808s bang, you have to talk to a sound designer. I'm a sound designer. I make my own 808s. We actually have a new pack called 8-08. It has like over 1,000 808s in there. So let's hop straight into it. So sound designing 808s comes down to the source sound. Here's, one 808 in particular. So what we're going to do is sample this out of Serum. We're going to add a little hit here on pattern 8, and we're going to just solo it. And what I'm going to do here is just right click, consolidate track from track start. And we're going to do 512 point sync, 32-bit float. Now, once this is done, it should print to the actual playlist. Okay, where we can process it further. So let's double click in here and let's hit Control L, or we can send it to any mixer channel. So I have different like plugins per the type of 808 I'm going for. So let's send it through channel 2 right now, because this has the majority of the process. So first, let's start with compression. Now, a lot of people tell you not to compress your 808s, and that's why you're not getting the sound you want, is because a lot of the 808s that you guys use are compressed sounds. So when you listen to knuckleheads tell you not to compress 808s, it's just like, you gotta tell them to be quiet sometimes. All right, so here's the threshold, and we're just pulling down, what is this, 3-to-1 ratio. We're barely pulling 3 dB out here, but I could go more aggressive with the sound here. The main thing is I just need the transient to poke through just a little bit. Now, 808s, you don't need to be super transient focused because it's not a kick. Okay, 808s, you can get away with losing some transient information if it gives you better tone. So yes, we are compressing as the first step here. Okay, the second step here is expansion. So I get kind of crazy with expansion. So there's no like set number here. I'm just kind of doing this by ear. But my expansion is set to an attack of 400 milliseconds. So it's going to be a very long kind of like linear gradient as it boosts the volume. And I have this set to a very fast release, 25 milliseconds of release. So here I'm just trying to get the body of the 808 to boost up a little bit instead of just being this downward decay curvature. Not a mandatory step, because if I turn it off, it just makes it stand out a little bit in the mix. I'll just play it before and after. Here's before. All right, now here's after. It just holds that sustain a little bit better. Now, another plugin I love for distortion and saturation is the Thermionic Culture Vulture. I also love the Real Analog sound. And you can get that through Access Analog at busyworksbeats.com/Access Analog. But here, this works a little bit differently. Basically, I keep mine on either T or P1, the distortion type. I don't mess with the mix level. I leave that. And then I'll pull down the output volume because it gets pretty loud. The sweet spot for this is between 6 and 7. Once you go beyond that point, it can get a little distorted. So here's before. So we're at like somewhat of a sine/pulse wave shape. And now we're going to take it into more of a sawtooth shape. Now this is a little aggressive for this tone. So I'll probably pull back either the input volume or the drive amount. So let's pull back the drive. And you have to compensate the output level. Now from here, you can mess with different saturation types. Devil Loc is pretty cool for certain styles of saturation. It has like this sound to it. Almost like a rattling of a box or something. So I like that tone. And we can turn up the mix so that rattling sound turns up, because it sounds like it's in a space even though it's not. So that's what I'm using Devil Loc to do, or Lock, whatever. And then Curvature is another super secret plugin by AP Mastering. I think he updated the interface to Curvature 2. This is the original Curvature, and I have mine on log, and I have my attack set to pretty fast, release set to 4. I don't know what everything does. These are the settings I used. The main thing is I have the mix level turned down. So if I turn it all the way up, it's going to give you this squashy sound, but I just wanted to hold all those harmonics that we added in place and then compensate with the output volume. I think Devil Loc might be a little too much for this sound though. So here's before Curvature. Now let's turn curvature on. See how it just makes the vibration just stay there and not just like dissipate? I think it helps some of the lower tones too. So we're using that basically as a parallel compressor. And you know, that what I would do from here is just print this 808. So an easy way to do this is just record it into Edison. Let's do new. Whoops. So let's record on play, meaning the play up here. Let's hit record and then hit play. Wait for it to fade and then hit stop. And if you have any gaps, you want to highlight the left side, hit this little trim the side stuff. If you have any room on the left side that has a gap, you could just trim that there. Just highlight the left side and hit this button. That will trim any silence. And then you could delete this. We don't need to trim the silence here because it's actually not silence. It's actually still a waveform happening. If you look closely, it's still something going on there. It's just very subtle. Okay. Now from here, I'll name the 808. Let's put this in the pack. So let's call this 808 20. I forgot what number I'm at. Let's just say 28. I forgot what number. And let's call this vicious. All right. And then I usually put my website here in the metadata so that when you guys find these 808s in other packs, you'll be like, oh, it's actually from BusyWorks Beats. Okay. So we're on number 31. Vicious. Okay. So what I can do here is a couple things. One, I'm going to boost the amplitude using this tool here. I usually boost it 4 dB until we get to somewhere where it's just loud enough. Okay. And then I'll resave this so that it's at a more boosted volume so that when people preview this in the browser, it has its full like density. Now we can still do stuff to the sound. So let's send it to the playlist as an audio. So look at the original 808 versus the processed 808. Let me make these bigger. So it's very clear, you know, that we've done something to the sound. Here's the original, just kind of linear and flat. Here's the process signal. Okay, now we can still do stuff to it. I'll just show you guys a couple things. We're not going to go crazy with this, but let's send this now through channel 1. So with 808 sound design, you're going to have to reprocess sounds a lot. Okay, so it's not just like one thing and you're done. You're going to have to reprocess this stuff, resample it. So one of the first things I like to mess with is standard clip. This adds that bite or the squariness to the waveform. So I have this set really loud. So let's pull this back. So here we're going to boost the volume into this, or we could lower the clip threshold, but let's lower the clipping threshold. What we're doing is taking off that pointy part of the 808 that was very sharp. Okay. And you guys can learn how to sound design your own drum kits at busyworksbeats.com/premium. I teach you guys how to sound design 808s, kicks, snares, hi-hats, a full drum kit. Okay. Not just 808s. And what we can do here is take off this pointy part. We could square that off. That's what we're doing here to add a little more harmonic density in the beginning of the sound. And I'm using the saturation to change the transfer curve. So if you want more, so it's really taste, you could just turn this up or down. I kind of like that tone. Now from here, in this specific chain, I'm going into an EQ. This is usually used when I'm losing some low end resonance because I'm squaring everything off. So we lose the attention to the boominess of the 808. And sometimes I boost up at either 75 or 60 hertz. Depends on the 808. Now this one might need to be tuned up, you know, a half step or so because the root note is not perfectly at 60. And it's hard to tell really because, but now we have that 60 boom. Let's pull this back, you know, let's do it at 1 dB. So you're not really going to tell a huge difference here. Here's without. Here's with. It's one of those things where it just adds a subtle amount of density. Now, normally I would go through Analog Matrix, the plugin that you can use to access analog. But for this video, I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. We're going to load up the Waves R bass. And what I like to do is find the second harmonic of the fundamental frequency. So if I boost it at 60 hertz, I'm going to look for 120 in Waves R bass, and I'm going to turn this down so you guys can hear. So this is going to give it more of a Glorilla type sound, like more of the modern girly 808s. Boosting the second harmonic here. So the more intensity, the more we're boosting that second harmonic. So let's do it before. Here's before. So a lot of thump, but not a lot of tone. Here's after. More tone, less thump. So we have to find the middle ground here. Let's do it before and after. Here's before. And let's turn it back on. So we do lose a little bit of thump, but we have to sacrifice that for tone. Now here's where this compressor is going to come into play. We're going to reshape some of the tonality because it became more sustained of a sound. And now we can use this compressor to add a little more curvature. This is a very heavy sound, so let's pull this. So we're clipping. We got to make sure we're not clipping. Now, sometimes 808s are not perfectly pan center. So in this case, you might use an imager to pull it into mono or just to check the stereo field to make sure it's centered. Not every 808 needs to be centered. I'm just using this to make sure it's not leaning to one side or another. So that's more of a checking tool. And let's just go through each one of these things and make sure that it's actually doing what we want. So let's turn off all these steps. Here's before. It's very loose and bubbly sounding. Very kind of soft and powdery. Now let's turn on these plugins one by one and make sure that it adds a goodness to the sound. Now here on this R bass, this is where we obviously lose a lot of energy. So here's where you got to really just figure out the best sweet spot for it. It's going to be different. Every single 808 is going to be different. So I'll just pull that back a little bit. And then let's add the compressor. Now, one last thing I like to do is to add an envelope to this. So right now it's just playing the entire sound and it's not in a sampler. So let's double click this 808. And I like to try these last couple things, which, you know, is it in a sampler? I guess we do have some functionalities here. So one, what we're going to do is fade this out. I didn't know we could do this on an audio clip. So we're going to fade it out to see if it just sounds better with less sustain. And from here, I like to use the pre-computed effects and then turn up what's called boost. So now we're going into the chain with a hotter signal. This is really just usually going to add more tone, especially if you have a saturation. But I like to do this as a final touch. Another thing I like to do is change the tuning because sometimes an 808 doesn't hit the best at middle C. So we're going to shift this around until it just feels right. As we can feel, the higher we go, the thinner it sounds. I feel like this tone is the best for this specific 808. So we're not bound to middle C all the time. And now we can mess with the sustain. I know what I'm going to do here is just print this. So let's right click and consolidate track from time selection, which is what we have highlighted, and just print this 808 again. Now the final test is to double click in this 808. Let's right click, edit in audio editor, and let's get rid of any looping and do the same exact thing. We want to name it. So let's name it 808. I think we were on what, 31. What's 31? Let's just call it Kingfisher. And then let's give it our website. Boom. Boom. All right, hit accept. And then we're going to go to file, save sample as, and I'm going to save it inside of the new 808 pack coming out soon called 808 Fire. It's not out yet. It's going to be at busyworksbeats.com. Let's save that. Now, again, the final touch I like to do, though, is boost the level. I feel like that level's cool, but it could be boosted maybe 2 more dB. So let's just boost this up a little bit. It's hard to tell the value. So you in the top left panel, you have to read that value. And here, let's boost this 2 dB. All right, now it feels a little more full. Let's save this as the same file. Just overwrite that. And now we're going to refresh our browser. And I have a little pattern mapped out. And all I'm going to do is swap out the new 808. Now, every 808 does not belong in every single drum pattern, but this is what I'm doing for the drums. And this, let me find the pattern that has our drums in it. Okay, so this is the final testing, is like, how did the 808 sound in a real pattern? Okay, so for example, I can highlight, whoops, in the channel rack, the 808, and then right click and hit S to swap out the 808. And I'm just gonna, also we wanna make sure it's not going through the chain again. So now I'm gonna listen to the other 808s that I've sound designed in context of an actual beat or drum pattern. See the difference between shortening an 808? It's more truncated and bouncy. Whereas the sustained 808s don't feel bouncy because it doesn't have enough time to decay the volume. So it just depends on the use of each 808. So let's try some of the newer ones. I'm just gonna try a couple. So this is the compressed 808. Funny enough, the compressed 808, people tell you not to compress, it sounds like one of the best ones. All right, now let's try the newer ones. It looks like I double named a lot of files here, so I gotta fix the number. Here are the 808s we built today. So this one's too long, we need to fade it. Kind of like that clip sound. Normally I don't like that clipping. So let's save this as short so that we have one long and one short. And now we can take off the pre-computed effects. So see how we're resampling this a lot? That's how 808s usually are processed. Here's our newer one. I feel like this could use a little more compression, but I don't want to get into the weeds of everything. So let's run it through channel 2. Turn off everything. Yeah, I feel like compression is needed on this one. So this is what I actually do as I'm sound designing. I hear it in real time. I'll go back and be like, it needs a little something, in this case, compression and a little volume. And then we're going to resample it back and then save it over and overwrite the file. So I just got to figure out how to play the pattern, not the pattern there. Let's record this. All right, now we got the 808. Now that we have the 808, we are going to get rid of the extra stuff, get rid of the song jump marker, and then rename this. So we're on 34. It's Kingfisher. Boom. So this is how I'm really sound designing. I'm showing you guys stuff that I actually do. Save this, boom, save. I don't think it needs more volume. I think it's fine on volume. Now we can refresh, and then we could load this up in our pattern to test it out. So it's a lot shorter, that's for sure. All right, so that is my process on how to make my 808 slap. Notice there's not just like this one formula that works for everything. It's a moving formula. If you guys want to learn how to sound design 808s, go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. I can teach you guys how to sound design 808s, kicks, hi-hats, snares, claps, and the whole drum kit, open hi-hats. And I show you guys how to process the sound as well to have a really high quality. So thank you guys for watching. It's Game for busyworksbeats.com. Peace out, guys.